Well, after that rebasing, or a new way of measuring the size of the economy, last year Nigeria took over South Africa as Africa's biggest economy. But Nigeria's outlook has since deteriorated after the price of oil plunged. The Nigerian state depends on oil for about 70% of its revenues. To discuss what this election means economically now, we're joined by someone who has travelled extensively and facilitated trade between South Africa and Nigeria. Dianna Games is Chief Executive of Advisory Africa at Work. Thank you so much for joining us, Dianna. So there's a lot going on in Nigeria. Economic woes, Boko Haram, this huge thorn in the flesh of the government. Also, this big divide still between the north, the Muslim north, and the Christian south. This is something in historic terms of an upheaval. What can you pinpoint it on?
I think there's been a real desire for change. I think people have voted as much for change possibly as they have voted for General Buhari. The voting numbers in the north of Nigeria, which is mostly Muslim but not entirely, from where General Buhari comes, voted very decisively in favor of him. I think that gives him a very clear mandate to deal with Boko Haram. There has been speculation about northern politicians, not him, but certainly forces within the north supporting Boko Haram and funding them. So it'll be interesting to see with this very decisive vote for General Buhari. You know, this really gives him a mandate to go in there, and also he's a former military man.
Yeah.
So
Has he come out very decisively against Boko Haram?
Oh yes, he's been impatient with the way the previous government has dealt with it, which has been fairly indecisively. It hasn't taken a strong stand until recently, until just before the election, and that is how Boko Haram has been emboldened. It's grown under this kind of neglectful, aspect of the previous PDP government.
Well, people were amazed. Schoolgirls were taken, and it didn't seem like much was ever done.
And also, I think what is an embarrassment to Nigerians is that their military used to be a huge force in the region. They have tackled and helped other countries solve their problems, and yet they weren't able to solve their own security problems. So that has been a big issue for Nigerians. They really feel like they need somebody who's decisive, and General Buhari is also stands for discipline. I think that's something people really are craving in Nigeria, because everything is just kind of falling apart, and Nigerians expected a lot more from the democratic dividend after military rule, and it just hasn't happened. And I think they're hoping for somebody to crack down on corruption to make things happen in a different way.
What about investors now? Because they were also happy. Is that because of Buhari himself, or also because of the change and the peaceful change? So good luck, Jonathan, phoning him, conceding defeat, telling his supporters to stay calm.
I think it's all of those things. I think people were just really pleased that the election's over. They wanted a result, whichever one it was, but I think the fact that it's a change of party is quite significant, because it does signal possibly a new direction for Nigeria. And as I mentioned, this discipline, this strong talk about against corruption. Every president has done it, and not many people have done anything about it. But Buhari's past suggests that he is one person who could possibly introduce austerity measures and really knuckle down on some of these issues that are really draining the Nigerian economy.
Well, what about the price of oil plunging, and Nigeria very dependent on oil? Is this a blessing in disguise maybe now, an opportunity to diversify? How diverse is the economy?
The economy is becoming diversified. What's not happening is that the diversifying the source of revenues. A lot of new sectors have grown, hence the rebasing showing a very different result from the previous measurement of the economy. But revenue, oil still accounts for revenues, and foreign exchange. So that is, I think the Nigerian economy bases its budget, or can balance its budget, on an oil price of around $120. It's now at least half that. So their revenue shortfall is significant. But that said, there are huge leakages in that economy. I mean, $20 billion was raised last year. That's gone missing from oil receipts. That's a huge amount of money.
Sure.
That a lot could be done with that. And now at a time of crisis, that becomes even more of an issue. And I think there's a sense that General Buhari could do something about it. There certainly was no indication that former President Jonathan was going to.
To what extent did economics play a role? Were they very different when they spoke about the economy? And Buhari, you said he's spoken about austerity, but surely they need to push exports as well.
They were both fairly weak on the economy in terms of their campaign platforms. In Africa generally, but including Nigeria, the economy is not a big selling point for candidates, presidential and other. So I think the Boko Haram factor was a very strong one in his favor, and this fight against corruption. When he was president in the 1980s, it was also at a time of very low oil prices. Nigeria was in the very same sort of crisis that it's in now, interestingly enough, and he was very decisive in the way he tackled it. Perhaps some say overzealous. He became quite unpopular as a result of these very strong measures he took, but he managed to do some good in the economy before he was also deposed in a military coup.
I've read that, there was violence, there was a clampdown, but he is still seen as almost squeaky clean, somebody who doesn't like and engage in corruption.
I think that's how people are seeing it now. I mean, he has lost 3 elections. He stood and lost 3 elections before now. So he wasn't I think if Nigerians had another choice, possibly he might not have been the person, given that history. But I think he's the right man at this time. I think people really feel that, hence the popular vote, because he had very strong support. And we're not just talking about Buhari himself, we're talking about the APC as well. They've had very strong support in the southern regions. So it's not just him being a northerner and a Muslim, it's actually to do with Nigeria supporting him. His support is very diversified.
Good to hear. Thank you so much for your analysis. That was Dianna Games from Africa at Work. More